Hey, Sir Minds, I hope you're having a great December and you've had a good year so far. Today, I'm really excited to welcome a guest who I saw on TV a couple weeks back in LA, and I just had the idea in the spur of the moment to reach out and message him. And with everything that's going on with student debt, and of course, like how we view inflation and finances, personal finances is a really big thing to me, I guess, just as a recent graduate and just seeing how it plays into our everyday lives, right? Like debt kind of controls us and locks us in chains. And today we got Nick Sky. He's a founder of Changed. They were on Shark Tank, maybe
25% of the company. What if I told you that the digital change from your everyday purchases can help pay off Americans' debt? Now we can using the Changed app. Robert, let's say you buy a cup of coffee for $3.45. Change rounds that up to $4 and you just save 55 cents towards your student loan. Simply create an account, link your bank, and Change rounds up your everyday purchases to the next dollar. I think we got a deal. We've got a deal.
That was a tough negotiation.
Congrats, guys.
Congrats, guys.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it, man.
already heard of them. But if you are a student with student debt, I recommend that you download their app and figure out how you can get ahead in that student loan payment. But well, Nick, man, it's really good to see you, man. It's quite fascinating how people just
Yeah,
connect on the
yeah.
internet.
I'm glad you were able to find me and then see that Shark Tank episode from years ago. We were on that show in 2018 and we were focused on student loans only. And since then, we've built our product to help support our members, which we call the Squirrel Squad, because we have a logo that's a squirrel. So we help them pay off all forms of debt, whether it's auto loans, personal loans, credit cards, really trying to help people have a better understanding of their debt situation, because at the end of the day, debt sucks. No one wants to think about it. We're trying to make it a positive experience. But I'm looking forward to sharing our story and answering any of your questions.
Man, absolutely. I guess just to begin, I mean, did you when how long was it until you got on Shark Tank from like starting the LLC or the
Yeah,
company?
so we were really fortunate, right? So we didn't necessarily start an LLC, but we started like working on, the idea 2017. And we launched our first iOS app in the App Store in March of 2017, right? And we were going through the process, like how do you launch, trying to do the research, trying to get some beta testers. We're like, we got a couple hundred people signed up for the beta. And like at the time with iOS, you have to like launch a test flight and users have to download a test flight app, then download the app. So, and this is still the same way, but it's a lot harder to get users to jump on a platform that they have to jump through hoops to get to. So we decided, hey, why not? Let's just launch it on the App Store. And this was 2017. And like a month into having the app in the App Store, Apple features us as one of the new apps they love, which is bananas to us, right? Because we're thinking we're going to get maybe 100 downloads. Then all of a sudden, I get like, because we worked at this co-working space in Chicago called 1871, incubator for tech in Chicago. And I start bumping into people and they're like, congrats on the Apple Store feature. Like, hey, congrats on, being featured by Apple. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then at the time I opened the App Store on the iPhone and we're like the first app front and center. I'm like, holy crap, like our email services are, reaching their limits and, people are emailing us through support. I'm like, how are you guys finding out about us? So through that feature, a producer from Shark Tank reached out to us and encouraged us to apply. We went through the application process, which, took several months. And then we eventually were asked to be on the show and we pitched and the rest is history.
Wow, man. Were you hesitant to go on Shark Tank, or was it just like, something that was just on an
I mean, at
automatic?
the time, we were like a 3-month-old company. We're like, this is the best possible thing that could happen, right? We understood that, it might be a little early. Like we were worried that, we had a couple hundred users, a couple $100 a month in revenue at that point. So like, is it too early? But at the same time, like you don't want to pass up that opportunity, right? So we're like, let's make sure that our systems can scale from a technical perspective. Let's make sure that we have enough, you know, um, resources to cover any type of customer support issues. And we were just saying, screw it, let's do it. And fortunately, after going through the process, it worked out and it's still paying dividends. Every time an episode re-airs, like you watch, we get more downloads, more users, more members on the platform.
Wow, that's so cool. I was gonna ask you, like, do you think that did you walking into that meeting, like, was that the most nervous you've ever been, like to pitch something before?
In the tank,
Yeah, in the tank.
When we were so it was there was a lot of production involved, right? This is TV, right? So like you're kind of distracted by like if it was a regular pitch event, we've pitched dozens of times at that point, and it's pretty easy. Like you flow off the top of your head, you know your lines, and you do all this other stuff, right? When it came to like pitching on Shark Tank, you had to kind of tighten a lot of that up. You had 90 seconds to get your entire message across before people start asking you questions. So Dan and I had practiced this, hundreds of times, like our little 90-second pitch, like word for word, getting it down to science. And when we went out there, it just kind of flowed and we blacked out, right? We blacked out, we went through our pitch, and then it was over, and then questions started being fired at us, right? Left and right. And we're like, one of the things that we knew we needed to do is to control the room, right? So like if five people are asking you questions, you have to address all those people, but then focus on one person, answer their question in a way that you want to, right? It's like
Yeah.
like you're asking me a question to get your agenda across. I'm going to answer that question to get my agenda across. So it's kind of like
Oh,
what
that's-
politicians do or what PR people do is like is it yes or no, and then you go around in circles, and then you finally answer the question that matches your agenda, right? That's what you're doing when you're pitching. You're trying to get your story out there. So we were able to control the room pretty well. On our episode, we had Barbara, we had Alex Rodriguez from the Yankees, Own Entrepreneur, we had Cuban, Lori, and then Robert Hershevek. So
no,
all of
no,
them.
Kevin O'Leary. Kevin wasn't there
No,
that
Kevin
day.
O'Leary.
No,
Thank,
Mr.
thank,
Wonderful.
good, thank goodness, right? He would have destroyed us. But like all of them, literally after we ended our pitch, asked questions at the same time, and we were like trying, like, hey, I heard all you guys' questions, but Alex, let me answer your question first, right? So we kind of
Wow.
control the room in that way, and like as soon as you kind of control that room, they kind of sit back, it's like, okay, we're gonna take this guy seriously, right? So we were in there, we pitched and answered questions for like over an hour, and they cut it down to the 9 minutes that you see on TV.
Mm, that's awesome, man. Isn't that funny how editing can really change the story's like perspective, right?
When we saw the first cut and like our faces on the preview, like there's this one point in the episode where we ask, is there any room for negotiation? And the camera zooms into Cuban's face. He's like, no. And then you see Dan and I like sweating a little bit and like whispering into each other's ears. And like then we instantly say, okay, yes, let's go. But there was a little time in between that we had a discussion. Um, but yeah, they cut it down to make it very, very entertaining.
What was it that you get guys walked in originally wanting to get raised? Was it like 250K for like 10%, 15% or something? Or
250 for 15%, which was like a pre-money of 1.6 million. And
uh-huh.
at that time, we had just launched our first product, had 800 bucks in revenue, like just
Dude,
getting
yeah.
right. And like before we went on the show, we talked to some experts, some VCs, like, hey, we've got this potential to pitch on the show, and like we didn't tell them the details because we couldn't. But like, what's a good valuation for the company, the traction at the time? And they're like, like in Chicago, probably like 1.5, 1.6. If you're on the coast, by 2.5. So we settled on the lower end of that spectrum. But at the end of the day, we had our ceiling in mind, right? It's like we'll give up a quarter of the company to get this deal done and landed the investor that we wanted. So, it was kind of a no-brainer at that point where like, all right, we hit our ceiling. Let's go.
Man, yeah, I think that's kind of rare, right? Because traditional VC, they'll, take a meeting and they'll think about it for like 100 hours, like before we fund them, right? But on the
Yeah,
spot, that's so
more
cool.
than 100 hours sometimes.
Yeah, man. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, was that yeah, like compared to like I guess other equity raises you guys did, do you think like that was the most fun you had, or like was that just like the
Yeah,
most
it was the biggest rush. Like, we raised our seed round in 2021, and it went down the traditional path, right? We don't have experience. We're first generation Americans. We were raised by a single mom. We don't have like a bunch of pedigree behind us where we have all these, private equity or, VC friends and folks, right? So we had to go out there and like start from the ground up, right? So we started pitching angels that we randomly would find in Chicago. Then through 1871, which is a great incubator in Chicago, we were able to get connected with other VCs, and we kind of went through that slog early on and like did not enjoy the process as much as Shark Tank, but learned a lot during that process, right? So when we were raising our seed round, we must have had 120 contacts,
meetings?
phone
Yeah.
calls, meetings, right? And we finally found the investor that had enough conviction and understood what we were building, and that aligned, right? We had a couple of commitments and term sheets that came through, but the one that we felt was the best for the company, that's the one we went with in our seed round.
I gotta ask you something I'm always like fascinated by. Like, what's it like hanging or meeting, hanging out with Mark Cuban, because he's one of those
Yeah.
perplexing businessmen in the world.
Yeah, I mean, we're not hanging out. He's not
Or
like,
yeah, I guess.
hey, let's go to a game together. He's a very straight shooter. He's a no bullshit kind of guy, right? Where he
Yeah.
will tell you how he feels and what his opinion on it is, but at the same time, he's not at the company day to day running it, right? So he's not going to try to insert himself and say, "Hey, you guys need to do this way," right? There are horror stories that I'm sure you hear about where like board members, like the Sam Altman thing, where they fire the leader and like all these things go bad.
Yeah.
Mark's very much so a connector and a sounding board, to the point where if we have a question or if we need an introduction to someone that is going to be hard for us to get to, he can pick up the phone or send an email and we'd be able to get that.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, if you ever talk to him again, tell him I say hi.
Yeah, no, I will.
That's so funny, man. The world's like quite not as big as you think, like all the time, you know? It's
Yeah,
one thing I'd love to talk to you, Nick, though, about is you guys were and everybody on Shark Tank they have to be vulnerable, right? Like the sharks are asking pressing questions and you can't really lie on the spot and say we have a different amount of users, right? Because like, or you can't really just sugarcoat things because they're gonna see through that, right? And one thing I found like really, what do you call that? Inspiring or just, relatable to was you and Dan, like one of you, I think Dan, he was driving Uber, or you might have been driving Uber in your spare
yeah,
time. Yeah, in your spare time, right? And
yeah,
can you just talk to me about like how do you recommend somebody who tells a story to be vulnerable like that? Because that's something like I think like you might want to not necessarily hide, but I think like I guess in society it seems like there's a lot of down look on, you know, Uber
yeah.
drivers and things like that, right?
I'm going to give you a couple answers on that. One, I think it's very much how the environment that you're raised in, right? So we're from the Midwest, raised by, like a immigrant mother, and like we always saw honesty, truth, and hustle and grinding. And my one of my favorite sayings is embrace the broom, right? So like don't be afraid to do the job that may not be in your job description or may feel like it's below you to get things done, right? So that's a form of honesty because, at the end of the day, you have a goal and whatever you need to get to that goal, you have to do. Other thing, I think in being vulnerable, specifically on Shark Tank, it's you're selling your story and yourself to people. Just like when investors say we invest in founders, we don't invest in the company. That's actually true because the company is nothing without the leadership that's driving the company's success. There's a billion ideas out there. 0.01% of them are going to work because someone's executing on it, right? So taking that leap from idea to execution, and we get users reaching out to us, pitching us ideas for the Changed app, and they want us to sign an NDA. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to sign an NDA. And one, like the idea is really nothing without execution, right? So, um, going back to like sharing your story, it's something that we always want to be very transparent with, the good, the bad, the ugly. Even with like when we share investor updates and things like that, it's never just, sunshine and rainbows. It's like, hey, this is what we're going to, we struggle with this. We have to do this and it negatively affected the company or whatever.
Man, yeah, no, kudos to you and good. You guys are still around, right? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes
We're like,
Shark
we're
Tanks,
like cockroaches. You can't get rid of us.
hell yeah. Well, Nick, I got to ask you a question that kind of popped into my head because, your company's sort of based on solving the problem of student debt. And me as a, graduate knowing or having at least like 26,000 of loans at once upon a time and realizing like that's something that I didn't think was a problem when I, walked into the classroom, but once you graduate, you're like, oh, damn, this is not fun anymore. How did you, as a student yourself, like, did you see yourself starting a company, or were you wanting to get into the workforce through another way? Or
Yeah. No. So, that's how I was raised. Like again, going back to my mom, first thing she did when she moved to this country was start her own business. It was a cleaning business, very, blue collar, but that's all we saw. Like we didn't see anyone go get a traditional 9 to 5 job or join corporate and like build their career in that way. So we that's all we saw, right? And even through college, like Dan and I were starting businesses, whether it's landscaping or like in college, I used to resell textbooks, right? Because at the end of the semester, you go to the bookstore and you resell your book to the bookstore to get a credit for your next one, but they're undercutting you by a lot, and then they're just reselling it for more. So what I would do is stand outside the doors, like, how much did the bookstore offer for you? $40? I'll give you $45. Then I would sell it on eBay for $65, right? And like slowly make money, beer money, during college to kind of, you know, um, survive, right? So
Yeah, right.
that's kind of in my nature, and same with Dan. But going back to like your comment on debt is the biggest killer of dreams.
Mm.
You cannot take risks in your life that you want to take if you have debt, because that's something that you need to pay back, right? If you don't, obviously you're in a shit situation and like you're
Yeah.
kind of crumbling around you. But we realized when we were starting this company that we were sacrificing goals that we had in life because of debt. You know, it was credit card debt, it was student loan debt, it was all these other forms of debt. And the story of like the origin story of change is that Dan, my brother and co-founder, he wanted to buy a house after he graduated college. He was making some pretty decent money working sales, and he found the house he wanted to buy. He got approved for the mortgage, but then he realized he had this,
Yeah.
$1,000 student loan bill on top of all these other bills. He wouldn't be able to take on a mortgage and make that payment every month without money being very tight. And those are the decisions people were making at the time that were kind of holding them back from taking the next step in their financial life.
Uh-huh.
So what we try to do with change is flip debt repayment from this negative, disjointed experience into this positive and encouraging one. So you're taking a look at your debt, and every time you log into change, it's a positive experience. You're like, hell yeah, I'm getting ahead of this. That let's go, let's send some more money, versus logging into like your student loan portal and seeing $80,000, and next month you see $79,990, and it's just not a positive experience. So that's kind of what we've tried to do with change. And you mentioned student loans, and that's where we started, because that's the best time to educate someone on how effective debt repayment can really truly change their life from a financial perspective. But now we cover auto loans. You can pay off your car with us. You could pay off your credit cards, personal loans, mortgages if you have a house. So we're trying to be where our members are at every stage of their financial life.
Man, that's such a important thing you guys are doing, man. So I
Thanks, man. I
think
mean, it's what gets us through some of the lows, and like when we're like struggling to figure something out, or we don't have a good growth month, or we can't get a product out in time and things like that. We're at the end of the day, we're helping solve a problem that we give a shit about, and we know a lot of other people do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Has I guess like one thing I'd love to hear from you is like do you do you think like the debt repayment history, like I guess like when we think about debt, like it seems like it didn't have such a bad like connotation, right? Until like maybe the 2010. I guess it's always been bad, but like,
It's always been bad.
right?
The repayment process hasn't changed since 3500 BC. You borrow money, you pay that person back. It's a transaction, right? The problem with what happened, in the late 1900s is all of this credit started becoming available, and financial services started happening, and people were borrowing beyond their means. It used to be, where you could buy a house for cash, or buy a house and pay it off within 5 years. But now there's a 30-year mortgage, which costs, if you buy a $200,000 house, it's costing you $400,000-$500,000 over the life of that loan.
Right, right.
So it's financial services that's sucking additional money out of consumers' hands. And whether you believe this or not, this is a true fact. 65% of a person's take-home pay goes to paying off their debt. So that means
Oh,
you only keep 45% of what you make after
30,
tax.
30, yeah, 35 or
Yeah,
something, even
yeah,
less, right?
35, yeah. And if you take your mortgage payment, your rent payment out of that, that's still, let's put, mortgage or rent under the cost of living
Uh-huh.
bucket. Still 30% of your take-home pay goes to
Credit
paying off
cards and bills.
debt, credit card bill, not even bills, credit
Yeah.
cards, auto loans, personal loans, medical debt, whatever it is.
Nick, one thing I want to ask you is like, what have you seen from maybe a user or somebody, your personal experience when somebody pays off debt, right? Because I think like I used to have 15K of debt until like last year from credit cards. Gladly, I paid it off. And then I paid off recently $13,000 of student loans. I
Yeah.
still have 7K. I'm probably gonna use
Oh,
change if it's
close,
gonna work.
close. Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's like this thing, right? Like where it's like you get so like down that you have the debt and you're just like, oh, okay, it's whatever. I'm not gonna be able to
You
fix
just
this,
ignore it. You just
Yeah,
ignore
you
it, right? And then
sweep
it
it
just
underneath the rug, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's this thing called the ostrich effect where ostriches bury their head in the sand to avoid what's going on out there. So that's what people are doing. They're like avoiding the problem, and the problem's not going anywhere. It's still happening, and your debt's accumulating, right? But you don't feel bad about it. So that's one of the things that we're really happy we're able to do is we don't make it a bad experience. It's a positive experience. See this cool little orange squirrel fill up every time you're saving money. Every time you transfer $5 from your account, we're telling you, hey, Dan, this $5 is actually worth $7. You just made $2 doing nothing, right? So like positive encouragement throughout the entire process is what helps people stay focused, right? Because we're automating this for you, but that's great, and you can automate it yourself through setting up scheduled payments and stuff like that. But you don't feel good about it. There's no positive reinforcement loop. So then 6 months down the line, you're like, oh, I'm sending an extra $50 here with my checking auto payment, but I actually need this month for this. You're gonna not going to value that payment as much. And you mentioned, how do people feel after they pay off their debt? And like, obviously, it's a great thing. And what we've experienced with change is people are very grateful for the fact that this is something that they can take off of their plate and focus on their life, right? Because we're not a company that's asking you to change your behaviors. It's more so, how do we show you that what we're building here and what we're doing for you by you making this one decision is going to positively impact your life moving forward. And then after they pay off their debt, we've got a stash my cash feature, which allows you to automate your savings for like a rainy day fund, or so you have some, emergency savings funds as well.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I think like with debt, like I was talking to one of my cousins. He was on the podcast too. He's a lawyer in Texas, and he was saying he had like 880. So school is very expensive, right? Like
Yeah,
law
yeah.
school is 180K cost him. And I was asking, he's an entrepreneur too, and I was asking him, how the hell did you pay this off? And he's like, I guess like he just would shovel, payments into that. And do you think like
So
school's
Dan,
getting too expensive, or what is this? You know?
yeah, I mean the problem. We could talk for hours about
Yeah, we
this, but
could.
the core problem is college becoming too expensive, but that's due to the fact that there's more money to pay for college because of these loan programs, right? The government essentially saying, we will fund the education of our country, and the university's like, all right, we'll fund our pockets and we'll build a new stadium and we'll make this amenity thing because we've got all this money, we've got to spend it. Just like if you have a budget, you want to exhaust your budget down to zero. Um, a funny thing with you mentioned lawyers, but like we see a lot of lawyers, dentists, doctors that have a ton of debt, and they're brilliant people in their fields, right? They're like very, very smart, but the one thing they might not be smart at is finances, right? Because if you're so good at one thing, it's hard to be good at all these other things. So like we've had in the past users that had over $500,000 in student loan debt.
Oh God.
So this one example is this person who went and got their MBA, decided that they didn't want to go into consulting, and then they figured out they wanted to be a dentist. So they went through dental school, and they borrowed a lot of that money. Now they had over $500,000 in student debt, and like that's just something it's going to be
Wow.
very difficult to dig out of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, for you, Nick, how did you pay off your student? Like how was your process?
I
Or
haven't.
you
I
haven't?
haven't. So I'm still paying it off. Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, when we were growing up, there wasn't a lot of money to go around. So we had to borrow money for school. We had to put a lot of things on credit cards. We had to buy our own cars. We had to, pay for them with borrowed money. And that kind of put us in a position to want to start changing because we were struggling with this so much. And as you're starting change as a founder, it's not like you're paying yourself a six-figure
Right,
salary
right, right.
off the bat. So, like I was saying, like I mentioned on Shark Tank, I was driving Uber just to pay the bills. And
I
part of
used to drive over, dude,
nice, dude, yeah. I mean, it was great because like during that time, Uber was it was
Making
very friendly, and like I always worked the morning shift, so all the people taking them downtown and like talking about their work, and I ran into some people that were like advisors and investors, so I just like started pitching our idea. I don't want to be that Uber driver that's forcing a conversation, but at the time, I'm like, I'm pitching my idea, I don't care, right? Um, and it was a job that gave me the flexibility to keep working on changed, while still being able to earn enough money to cover the bills.
yeah, I guess like Nick, one I guess kind of interesting question was like when you guys got the funding from Shark Tank, did you stop driving Uber or like you still do that in secret?
No, I don't do it anymore just because I'm working way too many hours at Change. We're still very much lean and
Yeah,
mean.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I did for sure for that year following, just because we only raised 250K and we had some big plans for it. So we still weren't paying ourselves a salary. We wanted to
Yeah.
focus on investing that into growth product and obviously growing our team.
Um, I guess Nick, one cool question. I mean, I don't know how familiar you're like as a fan of the Shark Tank show, but like, do you have another founder in there that you or story that you? I know Ring could have been on, was on there. They didn't get funded, but do you have like another favorite entrepreneur from the show that
I mean, there are a couple of
you know?
entrepreneurs on our episode that were from Chicago that were pretty cool. One was this guy named Martin. He had Sport Clips, which was like a barb, like the at the end of a barbell, like the clips that go on
Oh
there.
yeah, 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 yeah,
He had
yeah.
like ones that like snapped on and then like could hold all this weight. He was a cool dude. Um, and then I like the funny episodes, like the wine in a cup guy. That guy was hilarious. I very much saw it as entertainment. Like in college, we used to watch the show and like act as the investors. Like, what would you do? What valuation would you give this? Yada yada yada, and things like that. But my wife and I still
Oh
sit
yeah.
down, sit down and watch the show every Friday.
Man, it's a good show, you know. It's like one
Yeah.
of those things that teaches you that starting a business could be fun, but then it's, it's there's so much behind it you would never guess that was behind it. Like
I was meeting with an advisor the other day, and we talked about how, using mentors and advisors in your life seems like such a magic pill to figure out how to do things, but really there's an unlimited number of ways companies can be built, and there's never a straight line, and there isn't a thing to connect the dots, and there isn't, one right way to do it. And that show helps kind of teach younger people and just people that are looking to start businesses that, oh, there isn't just one path. This person did it this way. This person started 17 years ago and then this year just started making a ton of money. This person started 2 months ago and now they're making $10 million, right? There's so many different ways to start a business and the ways that they happen that it's cool to see that in mass on a show like that.
man, yeah, that's one of those things. It's just so like fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I
How
guess
about
like
you? What's one of your favorite
that's a good one, man. Like what is my favorite episode? Let's see, like Shark Tank, let me think. What was a good episode? I like when they pitch dog stuff. Like
yeah?
I have a dog.
Are
Like
you an animal person?
I'd say I'm a dog. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
say
dog
that.
person.
I'm
I see.
not the best with other dogs. With my dog, it's like or
Yeah,
friends.
I like a lot of the physical products because I want to try some of them out, right? There was like this one camping fire box thing that I wanted to buy. I think I have it in my cart somewhere, so I just haven't pulled the
Oh
trigger.
man,
Um,
yeah. There's
um,
some quirky ones. Shark Tank. What is I I don't even remember. I just yeah. I think like I'll I won't even like remember the name. But yeah, if for some reason I remember you're like dude, like the student that thing just resonates with me so interestingly.
yeah, I mean, there's
Um
so many different things that are pitched on there, right? So,
yeah, yeah.
that's what makes it such a great show. I just, speaking of like the entrepreneurial spirit you see on Shark Tank, it's something that, and we were speaking before we started here. It's such a sexy thing to do from people on the outside, but like a lot of the things that aren't shared, and the show helps expose it, is that it's a grind, and it's when you're in the trenches, it's like you're you're losing sleep, you're not taking care of your health. Like you can see how founders just brains change over the years that they build their companies, right? And it's definitely something that I think everyone can do if they want to do it, but it you have to make an investment in and sacrifice certain things in your life, right? Some relationships may fall, some opportunities you might have to pass by. You might not be able to go to your cousin's wedding in Hawaii or whatever, wherever you're
Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah.
So it's just really interesting to kind of see that on the show, but also for anyone listening, it's a commitment.
Yeah, yeah. Did you I guess coming back to that thing like of going to school and getting a degree, like did you Did you do you think like school helped you in your career? Or it's always a touchy thing, right? Because like people go to school and they don't necessarily do anything that the degree was meant for,
Yeah.
but it
I
did
think
help in a lot of ways.
I think degrees are useless unless you're going to a specialized field. Now, I'm not saying college is useless. I'm saying like my degree when I got it, like literally the diploma, it's in a filing cabinet that I haven't touched since I
Oh
graduated.
shit.
I don't even think I put it on my resumes. So what
Yeah.
college helps you do, and maybe college and education beyond high school is going to evolve over the next few decades, but it's a time in your life where you're developing um, and you're learning what you want to do in life. Because all the way through high school, you really aren't like, I mean, some people think about it, but um, you don't have the pressure to figure out what you want to do in life. And college is like a microcosm of, hey, putting pressure on you to figure out what you want to do in life. And there's a lot of opportunities to learn a lot of different things. So when I was in college, I took a whole bunch of different courses and things that I knew I wouldn't want to do or thought I didn't want to do, but found interest in, like, I like business law, right? I had no idea I even liked law. And at one point I wanted to go into law school, but didn't want to make that investment. But I think, that degree, the education you get there, whether it's, specifically with business or anything like that, is valuable. The experience there is valuable.
Yeah, yeah. Did you so I guess you went to University of Illinois Chicago, I'm
Illinois, yeah,
guessing.
yeah,
You got a degree in entrepreneurship or just Bachelor of
yeah,
Science and
yeah.
I always ask this question to people I get who get that I guess just a business degree. I didn't get one, but how much does that education or academia help you with being an entrepreneur if you think
Yeah.
it does?
I mean, the program that we had was great because it was in Chicago and it was at a time where the tech ecosystem was just starting off. So we had a lot of opportunities to meet with specific founders of companies and talk through their stories, and be connected with some Fortune 500 companies that had entrepreneurship programs or entrepreneurship programs within their organization. Talk through some of the innovative things that they were thinking through. But I think the reason I chose entrepreneurship was because I wanted to learn a little bit about a lot of different things.
Hmm.
If you choose any other type of business degree, or accounting or whatever, like even law school, like you're learning a lot about one thing. And
Hmm.
entrepreneurship allows you to learn a lot of things or a little bit about a lot of things. And that's kind of what I feel you need when you're trying to start a company and build something.
Man, that's right. I guess like jumping into what you guys are doing with change, I guess creating like the app, did you find that difficult? Like just making software and,
Yeah,
connecting
so
it with the
we
loans?
Dan and I weren't technical, like I could do a little bit. So we were on the hunt to find a co-founder. And at the time there was this website called cofounderslab.com, which was essentially like a LinkedIn for people that want to start companies together. It's like a kind of find your match dating site. And we ran across our CTO Mike's profile, and his profile read, "I build MVPs." Like,
Hmm.
holy shit, we need an MVP. Like, this is our guy, right? So we met him at a Whole Foods cafeteria, and I pitched him the idea. He's like, "I love it." He's like, "All right, you need me and my brother Dan because he's putting up the money to start this company." So he met him at an IHOP. They had pancakes. They pitched the idea, or Dan pitched the idea, and
Yeah.
Mike decided to join us. And it was, it's hard to find a co-founder that's willing to take that risk, but we were very fortunate in that.
Nick, I guess one thing I wanted to hear was like you guys self-funded it, right? Like out of your own pot, or even the Uber money or everything you
Yeah.
guys had?
So yeah, the initial money in. So I remember I was telling you the story about Dan wanting to buy his first home. The initial money in was Dan's down payment he was going to use to buy his home.
Oh
And it
wow.
was not much. It was like, a few grand.
Yeah.
Um, that was what allowed us to, get the initial concept developed and launch and gave us a little bit, like we weren't paying ourselves at that point. So obviously the biggest cost of running a business is the people.
Salaries. Yeah.
Paying ourselves, we were just paying for the services that we needed and things like that. So it gave us a few months of runway. And then, obviously the Shark Tank thing came about, and that was our first money in essentially.
And as business operator, do you feel like once you guys got significant customers, and I remember it was saying, or I looked on the app and it says pay $5 a month or $10 to for the service, right? Like, and then
Yeah.
how did you feel like when the company was making, I guess, significant revenue and you guys were trying to still operate but still figure out how to use the funds too? Like, Was that difficult for you at that time?
Yeah, I mean, so the early days, we obviously weren't making significant revenue, but as we've grown, um, we've started to make revenue to a point where we can become a self-sustaining business, which is always great because relying on investment dollars is one route to go when building a company, but it gives you a lot less control over that. So we're raising money mindfully from people that, believe in what we're building and see a large positive outcome on the other side of this. You can't convince everybody of that. But over the years, we've, focused on
Yeah.
unit economics, focused on customer acquisition costs, focused on all these key metrics that are very baseline business based. Might maybe not, for a social media startup that's just trying to get eyeballs and users, but for a fintech that's trying to scale and grow with a good unit economics, it was very important for us to figure that out. And it did take several years for us to get there.
Man, that's one of the cool stories, you know. We I guess yeah, as podcasters interviewed somebody like something like 115 plus people on entrepreneurship. The conversation just never gets old to me. Like
And it's all because it's always different. Like you can interview
yeah,
1,000 people. You're going to learn something from every little conversation.
man, that is so true.
Yeah.
Uh well, I guess like Nick, like that's really cool what we've covered so far. I think like for you as an entrepreneur, do you still feel like an entrepreneur, right? Because once you get like, do you feel like more of a, I guess like a tried and true CEO versus, you know, how entrepreneurs they kind of graduate to
Yeah.
sustainable business at some point?
Yeah, I take my duty and role as CEO very seriously, and that's, my duty is to build value for our shareholders, including investors, team members, users. But I'm very much so an operational CEO versus just being out there raising money all the time. So I'm deep in the trenches. I'm doing product. I'm doing, customer calls. I'm doing sales, things like that, because it's just kind of what you need to do. I need to embrace the broom, right? I need to do everything that needs to be done to make to reach our goals and make our company successful. Because this is something that needs to be out there. Like if we were to shut down tomorrow, there'd be tens of thousands of people that would be very angry with us, right? So we want to make sure that we're checking all our boxes, crossing our T's, dotting our I's as we continue to grow the business.
Yeah, one thing, Nick, I guess like just before we get into the latter end of the podcast is like, how did you guys come up or try to do customer marketing and, you know, customer acquisition since yeah, it seems like everybody or every company needs that to be working at all cylinders, you know? Like
Yeah. I mean, we were fortunate early on to have Shark Tank, and then we got a bunch of press around that. So that gave us our initial customer acquisition bucket. And then as we continue to grow, there's a lot of referrals. So we tried to lean on the organic growth. And we recently just started spending some money on paid acquisition and are seeing some pretty good customer acquisition lifetime value numbers. And like just our payback period is super quick. So that's good from a cash flow perspective. But yeah, I mean, we're trying a lot of things and focusing on the things that work. We do a lot of experiments and kill things really quickly when they're not working.
man, that's so cool to hear. Like the experiments, like I think that's something that, you know, entrepreneurs and business owners don't really,
They can get expensive.
you
Like you
know.
can experiment so much that you're straining your resources and you're spending too much money on channels, for instance, for acquisition when you shouldn't be. So it's really important to test a lot, but kill the losers quickly and double down on the winners.
Do you think your sense of urgency shifted a little bit once, you know, you guys got funding and had a little bit more of resource to run the company, or do you think like it just stayed the same?
I There's more of a sense of urgency now than ever. Like, right, it's once you raise money, your goal now shifts from let's build a cool, awesome business that's going to make a ton of money to let's build a gigantic company that's going to return billions of dollars to shareholders and all this. Right? So it's a different mindset you have to be in once you take your first dollar of VC, right? And we have some patient capital, like as far as investors, but if we went down the traditional, West Coast or East Coast fundraising path, we'd probably have to be burning a whole bunch of money just to
Yeah, yeah,
reach our goals. So like we're building this company to make it a big company. We're not and get to, making money. We're not building this company to reach our next fundraising milestone, right? So those are
right.
the metrics we're looking at it. Sometimes a lot of them overlap, but it's not like, hey, I need to hit this metric by December 2026 to raise our Series B. I'm thinking I need to hit $10 million in revenue in 2024 in order to continue growing this business in the way that we want to build it.
No, I love that, man. I think like, I guess startups, at least on the coast, right, as you allude to, like they have that, let's spend and spend and spend kind of perspective.
And
And
sometimes it's good. I don't want like I'm not like throwing shade anywhere. Like
yeah,
it's a business that works, right? Growing and getting ahead of competition and being the first one out there with the most amount of users, the most amount of revenue is the way to do it. But there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of paths to do that.
yeah.
Is heavy fundraising. One is maybe a little slower growth, but better unit economics.
No, that's right. I want to talk about a couple more things here. When it comes to debt, do you perceive like buying a home, or it seems like that's good debt, right? But then again, you look at rates and you don't necessarily, that's not necessarily the case. Do you think
It,
that, yeah, like do you think like different, like comparing student loans and credit cards and, mortgages, like do you have like a different aspect on like which one is better over the other?
No, it depends on what your goals in life are. Because if you want to own a home and have that freedom and check that off your box, and like then buy a home. It doesn't matter if the interest rates are 10%. It doesn't matter if the prices are high. Like if you're happy with this home and you can afford it to a point where you're not living beyond your means, then that's what you need to do because we
Yeah,
don't live this life to at the end of it say, hey, I saved a whole bunch of money, but I didn't do anything I wanted to. See you later, right?
right,
So
right,
it
right.
all depends. Like the things that are unhealthy are racking up a bunch of credit card debt for things that you don't need, right? Like sometimes credit cards are a very useful tool for people that need to adjust and manage their cash flow as they're getting paid, right? But it's a very slippery slope. And don't even get me started on payday loans and things that are a lot more predatory than traditional debt. But at the end of the day, it's all debt. It's all borrowed money for things that you're essentially making payments for things that you bought before. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, just having interest to come in there too and play into that.
like
That's awesome.
if you buy like a pair of shoes and you throw those pairs of shoes out, but you're still making the payments on those shoes because you put it on some, I don't know, 25-month plan, that
Yeah.
making payments on something that's in the garbage. I don't know.
No, that's cool, man. Yeah, I think like finance is something interesting to me. I was in Manhattan one time and I bumped into like the founder of a firm on the street and yeah, man, it's definitely like I think with the digitalization of like, using a phone to pay for everything, it doesn't feel like you're really buying anything sometimes, like you're
Yeah,
just
but
clicking buttons.
Dan, we're not going back to cash, so we're gonna have to learn how to live with all these tools that we have in our pockets.
Tell me about it, man. One thing I guess, okay, last couple things, Nick, are if there's anything that you learned about yourself as an entrepreneur that you didn't necessarily know, like what would you say that is? Like, when it comes to like perseverance or I guess just forcing like yourself to work when it's uncomfortable and the I guess the odds feel stacked against you or like, your lifestyle is being
Um,
compromised. What is it that you learned?
yeah, I mean, I've definitely learned that I'm more patient than I thought I was, and definitely more I have more staying power than I thought I would have, right? So, before doing this, I was very um I don't say impatient, but I wanted a result quickly, right? I wanted to put $1 into this machine and get $10 out right away. And I knew that that's not something that um you can build overnight. So like learning patience throughout the process. We've been at this for a few years, right? And we're still figuring shit out. So it's not like um you learn everything in the first year of startup boot camp
Yeah,
school,
yeah.
and you're a pro. It's like you're learning something every day. Um Another thing I learned is like one of the things that I have learned I need to be better at is managing my relationships outside of work. Just like I lose touch with friends, I lose touch with family members because I'm focused on work. Like obviously, so I have my wife and our firstborn, so I'm very focused on that like small nuclear family relationship. But like some cousins I haven't seen in a while, and friends. Like I was asked to go to a dinner tomorrow to celebrate one of my friends' birthdays, and I'm like, I can't go. I got to work, right?
Mm.
So it's managing your time better. I think at the end of the day, makes you a more productive person if you take some time for yourself.
No, that's tried and true wisdom. I guess Nick, did you ever got did have you has Change ever like received feedback from like the loan service providers? Like, did they say like, are they like in support of you, or are they like, no, don't do this. We want more interest payments. Like, is there even a
Yeah.
do they even
On
reach out or
on the
anything?
on the student loan side, they don't get paid interest, so they just service the loan. They have no problem with it. They love us.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
we haven't run into any issues from lenders saying, "Hey, we're not going to accept these payments because you're helping people pay off their debt early." I don't think that'd be good business for them.
The way it works, right, just to explain for the audience, is like you know, it's like I'll have an app and like a lot of the roundups, like say I bought like a coconut water or whatever,
Yeah.
the roundups they add up and then that add up that change added up that goes towards some loan or some debt in there that's connected already that I don't even
Yeah,
have to
that's
press
so that's
buttons.
that's that's our bread and butter feature, right? So you link your spending accounts, and as you're spending, buying things, gas, groceries, coconut waters, whatever, we round up the spare change from those transactions. So you buy something for $3.49, we take 51 cents, put it in your changed account, and then we start storing all your roundups there. And once it reaches, $25 in accumulated roundups over the time, we send a payment toward your loan servicer every single time. So it's
Every
automated, right?
single time.
Technically, our platform is meant to be a set it and forget it platform. So you link your spending accounts, you link your debt, and then as you spend, we'll just send payments. And we'll let you know, hey, we sent another payment, Dan. Hey, we sent another payment, Dan. And then like we'll show you how much time and money you're saving with those payments. But what we found is people
Uh-huh.
are engaging with the app, right? So they're like, oh, let me do a savings boost because I have a little bit of extra cash. Or I want to see where my scroll is and when am I going to send my next payment? Because we set this threshold, so we're not sending, nickels and dimes to all these servicers and things like that. You have to wait till you reach the threshold. So
Yeah.
we're like, oh, I'm $5 away from sending my next payment. I'm gonna do a one-time boost. So you can schedule a transfer at one time or schedule them, every Friday when you get paid or every other Friday, whatever that is.
Yeah, yeah, I've
Uh,
got it. I've got to sign up and
yeah,
try
yeah,
it out myself.
yeah. You've got to try it out, man. If you've got a little bit of student loan debt left, you get rid of that, man.
No, yeah, it's a pain in the butt. So, no, I guess what else could we talk? I guess when it yeah, no, this has been a really good conversation. I think like student loans is such a harassing problem that gets
It's
away with it.
Yeah, I mean all debt in general, right? It's if you're debt free, you are in a position to make anything you want in life happen. If you have debt, you are not, I don't want to say owned, but you are beholden
Stuck,
to,
right? Kind of
yeah, you're
stuck.
stuck. Like I can't, take a year off of work or whatever because I have to all these bills, all these pay. Like if I wanted to, travel the country in a cool Pinteresty RV thing and like vagabond, I wouldn't be able to do that because I've got all this debt.
Yeah,
So
and the interest, I think what you guys really do, the value is like it counteracts the interest, right? Because like the interest payment, like
oh
I'll
yeah,
pay
no,
the
I mean
principal, but the interest will still f screw me over, you know?
yeah, you need to as you're making payments, you're lowering your principal, which means they're charging you interest on less principal, which saves you at the end of the day.
Nick, two more questions, okay?
Yeah,
One
yeah.
question is, if you could have a dinner with anybody in the world when it comes to business and just shoot the shit, like who do you think that would be with if you could have the option?
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive, yeah, yeah.
Uh, I think Thomas Edison.
Thomas, the
Because I like how, I mean, just the quotes that he's got, it just brings so true to me. When people say, "Oh, you're a failure. You failed thousands of times." Like, no, I just learned 1,000 ways that wouldn't work, right? So, like, I know I know I'm getting closer to what works. It's like when you're raising money. It's like every no, it gets you one no, one step closer to a yes, right? So I like that type of mentality where like, don't look down on yourself. Like, if this fails, that just means that's not the right way to do it. Do it a different way, right? Um, I don't know what we talk about. I'm not a huge fan of light bulbs. I don't know
yeah,
much
yeah,
about it,
yeah,
but
yeah. Next question is, what would you say your startup mindset is when it comes to creating change and being a CEO of or founder of a, startup?
my mindset. Um, Persistence. A mindset of being persistent, being like I said, we're cockroaches. Like
Uh-huh.
we're here. We're not going anywhere, right? You try to get rid of us, I dare you. It's a mindset of just keep pushing. I feel like a lot of people give up too early,
Yeah.
and it's one thing if you fail, but you never really fail until you quit.
Yeah.
Because you could have many failures in your journey to success, but when you quit, that's a true failure. Like there's this talk about you need to know when you quit, and I understand there are certain scenarios where that makes sense, but you know, I don't see I don't see a future of where we give up or quit. Like
You've never thought of like ending the company or anything, or like pursuing anything
no,
else, or no?
no. I mean, if there's an opportunity for us to like, join a larger company so we
Yeah.
have more people, sure, of course. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's been exit thoughts and there's been exit conversations, but it's not like I would want to sell this company to someone to then just kill it like that.
Right.
I'd rather
Right.
just keep running the company, right?
Well, Nick, that does it for the podcast, man. Any last words or anything like you want to say that we didn't get the
No,
chance
I
to cover
mean,
yet?
one, Dan, download the Change App and pay off your student loans. Two, anyone that is thinking about starting a company and you're just holding on to the idea and like waiting to take the leap, take the leap. You don't need to quit your job to take the leap. You can experiment and like talk to some early beta users, put up a landing page, just put it on your LinkedIn. Like people, LinkedIn is like the source of everybody's fake jobs, right? So put up like founder of ABC company, and they're like, oh, what is that? Put up a landing page, see how much traction you get there. And then third thing is if you have debt, any type of debt, download the Changed app, available on iOS and Android. You can Google changed debt payoff or anything like that. You'll be able to find us and hit us up on our socials. We're always watching those and responding.
Gotcha. Well, Nick, man, it's been such a good conversation, and I'm glad to have had it, and happy holidays to you, and excited to see what else the future holds.
Same to you, Dan. It's been a blast chatting with you. Thanks for letting us
Oh
share.
man.